Hi, my friends. It's David Ault, and I want to thank you once again for being here and participating in the gathering. Quickly, before we get started, I want to invite you to do a check-in with your heart. And when I say the heart, I'm talking about that pure intuitive state that is aligned with that which is the infinite. Whatever word that you want to associate with the infinite, God, light, source, intelligence, love, I want you to do a quick check-in here. And I want you to ask yourself a question. Do I feel supported by that? Do I feel supported by God? Do I feel supported by source, by light, by infinite intelligence? And answer yourself honestly. Do I feel supported? And if the answer is no, ask yourself what feels to be in the way. Go ahead, ask yourself what is the thing that appears to be in the way of feeling supported by God or by love or by source. And if your answer is yes, ask yourself, is it possible to take that support and expand it even further? And so in both of these questions, ultimately we can come to realize that support or involvement or relationship with this thing that we term to be the divine design, that we determine to be the perfection of that which is the intricacy, the meticulousness of the universe, all of those things, if we do not feel supported by that, or even if we do, it's not because it is separate from us, but it is a measurement or a barometer of where we are most attuned to. And this isn't an assessment to judge ourselves in any way, but it is to understand that if it is the ultimate stable presence, then the responsibility of being supported or being even more supported does not rest upon that thing or the absence of that thing, but it rests upon my conviction to be more involved and absorbed within that thing. So take a breath and ask yourself, are you willing to be more involved? Are you willing to strengthen a conviction within you to have this thing, this unwavering love, this unwavering divine design, this unwavering peace to be more prevalent in your life? Are you willing? And let's assume that we all say yes. And so let's take that willingness now into this brief time that we have together by saying yes. And in saying yes, it means that we envision ourselves listening more deeply than perhaps we listened before. So if you're busying around and this is just playing in the background, let's say, stop. Stop what you're doing and listen. Allow yourself to take deep breaths and to calm and to bear witness to what might want to be revealed in this short time together. Taking a breath in, a breath of personal permission to give yourself that gift. We move forward now in great thanksgiving, in great expectancy, with an open heart, with a fresh ear, with a willingness to hear and receive exactly what it is that we need. And let's say together, and so it is. Ashe. Amen. All right, so we are in a space of openness and willingness, right? I hope so. Okay. So I studied, my whole adult spiritual path was around the text, The Science of Mind, mostly, written by Ernest Holmes. It's where I got my divinity degree, and it's where most of my absorption, focus, and teaching came from. And I recall Ernest Holmes once saying that everyone is a person of faith. Intrigued by that. Everyone is a person of faith. He said, we either have a faith that things will work out, or we have a faith that they won't. And I thought that that was a really interesting way of looking at the fact that faith in and of itself is simply not just a belief, but it is a built up and exercised sense of conviction. The root of conviction is convinced. So we are people, we are beings that have been convinced. So to have faith, conviction, I'm convinced that things are either going to work out, or I am convinced that they won't. Now, what are these things? These things are, sometimes we would call them manifestations, or the effects that we experience on a regular basis in the outside world. So if my conviction is in the fact that things always work out, then my faith at some point had to lean into the mystery. Meaning, in order for me to have the manifestation or the experience of an effect that was beyond appearances, I had to give up being limited by appearances. If my faith is in things not working out, it means that that step then, or a regularity of that step in leaning beyond appearances, has yet to happen. Because I have been groomed, I have been domesticated, I have been saturated around people who are constantly at the mercy of appearances. Those who have somehow seemingly used their faith on the spectrum to be more in alignment with just they have an expectancy of good, even when things look like horrible, chaotic in front of them. There's an unwavering expectancy of good. Those people have somehow been introduced, taught, influenced by others who have done the same. So what makes a person then make that decision if they haven't been taught before? So I like the idea that we are all people of faith. Would you like to be on the spectrum of faith where you have built up a conviction in this knowing that things are always working together for good? Would you like to be that person? And be careful the way in which you answer that, because if you say yes to that, that means that there is going to be a requirement of you to lay down a lot of belief systems, to lay down a lot of identities, the identity of yourself that nothing ever works out for you, the identity of yourself that life fundamentally is hard and unfair, the identity of yourself that that your story, your wounding, your path is a special one that most people are not going to be able to relate to. You're going to have to lay that down as the preeminent go-to, and you're going to have to practice more of looking beyond that story and be open and available to the fact that all of those things and all of the people, the players in those stories, were not what they seemed to be, that there's more to it. That those situations were somehow portals or gates that you had to walk through in order to evolve. So, conviction, the root, convinced. What are you convinced of? And whatever you answer honestly is the ongoing experience that you have. So what I love about this, we'll call it a challenge. Are you challenged to be more convinced in the sustaining mindset of solution? If you are challenged by that and you are willing to take the challenge, what then is required of us is to begin to look at things like despair. So if everything is working for our good, that makes then persons, places, and things master teachers. Not things to run away from, not things to build walls of protection around, not things to close our hearts to. But it means that each of those things are representations of spiritual teachers or spiritual masters. To me, despair, for example, is a master teacher. I always like to call the human experience the land of two. I love that phrase. I love that example. I heard it from Ram Dass that we come from the one into the land of two. The land of two is simply incarnating as a human in the plane of form where everything seems to be big, small, light, dark, good, bad, good, evil, us, them. It's just this sea of separation that we are groomed to believe is true. And the real key, or the main objective in the land of two, is to remember now where you came from. Or in other words, remember who you really are, which is the embodiment, the offspring, the instrument of the one. So everything that is a part of the one, I am. I am that I am. It's just like Rumi saying, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are an ocean in the drop. So many wisdom teachers and sages have found vocabulary, examples, metaphors, allegories in order to remind us to wake up to the fact that we are in the land of two. And yet, even in the appearance of the land of two, of all things separate, we are a part of the one. When we wake up to that, when we have a conviction to wake up to that, to understand and lean into the awareness that everything is working for our good, then we don't take the separations and all of its varying aspects personally. I can even then go back and look at the horrors of my life, or you can go back and look at the woundings of your life. And now that there's a little bit of distance, now that there is a little bit of evaluation and hopeful wisdom cultivated, you can begin to look at those circumstances differently, realizing that, yes, in the land of two, it's awful. Land of two, unjust. Land of two, all of these things that would naturally want us to build defenses. But if you are a student of wanting, a spiritual seeker, wanting to know more of who you are, of waking up to the reality that you've never been separate from the one, then you're going to have to reconcile some of those beliefs and thoughts, right? So despair is one of them. I get to evaluate the series, the ongoing series of my life, all the decades that I've been alive. I get to reevaluate my relationship with despair. So in the past, what I've done with despair is tried to run away from it, try to medicate from it, try to eat my way out of it, try to do anything not to address it, to intellectualize it, to over-spiritualize it in a way that is all hypothetical and no embodiment. And so to stop in this time and say, my conviction is to have more of a realization of the one, then I get to look at despair and realize what it is, a master teacher. If I don't do that, what I notice mostly in the people that I am blessed to work with is that when they don't see despair as a master teacher, then despair midwives for them the offspring of futility. Futility meaning that nothing's ever going to work out. It's futile. And yet people have the capability of building lives with this low running river of futility constantly moving underneath them. They will go on and get degrees, education. They will raise families. They will establish careers, but this low level of futility is still there. And since it is still there, and you could even call it the foundation that they build all of this on, then everything that they build will perpetually continue to wobble and collapse because it's built on this low-level river of despair, of futility, which is the offspring of despair. If they have taken their despair and in their journey of healing and reawakening, they have allowed despair to lead them in midwife and offspring of surrender, then that surrender is a surrender to things looking and being as they seem. A surrender to trying to use our bloody-knuckled grip to control life. A surrender in relinquishing attachment to story and to people and to wounding. It's a constant surrender of letting go what my ego or my preservation energy would say that I need to use in order to be safe, in order to do all of the things, in order to shield myself from an uncaring, horrible world. But if I use my despair to surrender, then all of a sudden in my surrender, the surrender of my human control, I am suddenly able to see. I'm able to see through the eyes of that which I would call God, or through the eyes of love. I'm able to see the seeming disorder and realize that all along there has been order among the chaos. So despair as a master teacher, I will either be unconscious to it as a master teacher and will build a life of futility, or I will see it as a master teacher, accept it as a willing student, and lean more towards this idea of surrender. And in my surrender, there is spaciousness. In my surrender, I am able to begin to see how all along wisdom and meticulousness has beautifully played itself out. Sometimes we say it this way, hindsight is 20/20. When I have distance from the thing, I can look back and I can go, wow, at the time I thought that was horrible. But in hindsight, I can see how all of that was working together for my good. Perhaps we can live in the energy of hindsight even in the moment through surrender. And so everyone is a person of faith. We either have a faith that things are working out for us or a faith that they're not. And if that is the end of both of this spectrum that we're calling faith or belief system or conviction, then where are you on the spectrum? And where do you want to be? And it means that if you want to move more towards the solution, begin to make a list of all of the things, all of the people, all of the wounding, all of the circumstance. Make a list. Make a list of the people who have harmed you. Make a list of all of the circumstances of business failings or humiliations or woundings or aggressions. Make a list of all of these things, no matter how horrible they might be, no matter how much they are the genesis behind a life of, let's say, addiction, or in anything that has tried to build walls of protection. Make a list of these things. And as you go through this list, look at all of them and ask yourself, am I willing to see this person, place, or thing as a teacher, as a catalyst? And the despair from this, am I willing to let that despair now work for me instead of against me? I explained this, and it sounds as though it's simplistic, but to do the work, to do any kind of work where we are cultivating a new paradigm of conviction, that's asking a lot of you. It's not even as simple as asking you to embrace forgiveness for these things. It's asking you to look at everything that has led up to this moment in a different light. to look at everything and play around with the idea that nothing has ever been as it seemed. That in the land of two, all of those things were a part of the lesson plan. And if you're going to come in and you're going to incarnate in the land of two, you might as well take the lesson plan. But don't let yourself be defeated in the process of that by not understanding the lesson. So, you are a person of faith. And at any moment, we can lean into more and more of the surrender of that. You don't have to understand or know the how. All that needs to be there in order to continue expanding and healing is to say, I'm willing. I'm willing to heal. I'm willing to be free. I'm willing to be at peace. That's it. That's as simple and as much as you need to do. I am willing to heal. I am willing to be free. I am willing to be at peace. When you say those things, realize that healing, freedom, and peace already are inside you. And willingness is like cleaning the window. Willingness is like removing a veil. Willingness is like opening up to something that is already inside you. And if you can remain willing, then here's the cool thing. People will show up. Resources that will be a part of your willingness will show up. Information will show up. Conversation will feel sort of synchronistic, but in reality, it's just matching the energy of your willingness. So, I have faith. I have faith that whoever is listening to this is willing to lean more into their faith representing the divine plan, the infinite intelligence, the relaxation that all things are working together for good. And imagine if more people did that. It means that then we would be walking around in the land of two, helping others to reawaken as well. Not from proselytizing, but from just embodying and emanating this in a way that we are restoring. We are restoring and bringing back to life the inherent goodness of all. That's peace. That's advocacy in its most pure form. That is all of us coming back to life, to reawakening to the magnificence of our value, our truth, and our love. May you choose that this day